the job of a leader, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a chair of a board, the job of a leader is to recognize and secure the future. Leader must always guard against being myopic.
Welcome to the next episode of the Leadingself podcast. My name is Gugulethu Maqetuka, your host. As we say in this podcast, we celebrate leadership, we celebrate leaders who are making an impact. And today we have such a leader who has made and continues to make great waves in improving our systems as a country, who is improving our, the way we deal with things, the way we manage people, manage infrastructure, manage people. And we have him today, Mr. Mpho Makwana. Ndade Mpho Makwana. I've met Ndade Makwana many years ago.
51 years ago.
Yeah, 51 years ago. I was still, a young Turk in the PR game, working for the Black Management Forum. At the time, who were my clients. And you can imagine the starry-eyed me working with Ndade Makwana. So he has a lot of experience in executive roles, but also in boards. I mean, he's chaired Nedbank, he's chaired recently Eskom, and we're going to go into that because I know a lot of you want to know what is happening, load shedding. So we'll go into some of those conversations. But let me first welcome Ndade Makwana. Thank you. Welcome to the Leadingself podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here, and Ndade Maqetuka. It's been a privilege. As you were saying, it feels like only yesterday. As I was saying to you as I was walking into the studio, there's something serendipitous about it. The owner of the studio, the family, well known to me also for years. But it's interesting. We're meeting in Krakow, and before Sandton was fancy, Krakow was one of those areas.
Biggest
Rosebank. And I think at that time, 31 years ago, we had our first coffee not far from here.
Wow. And it was quite interesting that you actually remembered the location when we first met 31 years ago. Ndade Makwana, you've blazed the trail. You've been playing for the A team in this country from the BMF days, till now. You've served in various senior roles. Tell us about the life lessons you've had, around leadership. Where are we as a country from a leadership perspective? And tell us a little bit about your own impressions in your journey in leading institutions, but also developing as a young leader. I know it's a loaded question. It covers generations, but I'm really interested in your impressions around leadership.
Well, leadership is a broad topic. My sense is that, and I'm currently working on a manuscript. It's one of the most difficult things I've had to work on for a book. And my point of departure is that as a leader, the forging there starts in the home.
Okay.
In my case, I started my leadership journey by observing perhaps my grandparents. My grandfather on the maternal side was the first Black reverend. They call them domineer in Afrikaans.
Yeah.
He was the first reverend in the Dutch Reformed Church. It was called Mpho Makwana in Africa.
Yeah.
And he was a son of a prominent chief that turned his father down when his father told him, I'm preparing you for succession. And he said, no, there's a new nobility that I'm going to pursue called education. And as a result, that entire realm where he comes from became renowned for producing in the Mpho Samantri well-renowned, well-respected strawberries. On my paternal side, my paternal grandfather, after whom I'm named, didn't go beyond substandard 1, which today I think is grade 3 or so. But he was self-taught. He learned how to write, how to read Afrikaans fluently, and he read English newspapers, and became a pioneer in his own right. Grew up as a son of a farm laborer, a grandson of the traditional healer. But on the farms where they grew up in Leadingself, he became the first black person to own a general dealer there. And when the forced removals occurred in the 40s, they were removed around 45 thereabouts from Leadingself. Wherever they settled, he owned a general dealer.
Okay. So there was that
entrepreneurial bug hit him, but he solved many problems for the community, for himself as well and his peers. When you mentioned BMF, when I worked at BMF in 41 District in downtown Joburg, I got a strange call from him saying, "Grandson, you told me you work in this big city. I'm here. And what are you doing here?" No, I've come to sort out my affairs. That was his response to. I said, no, but you could have called me and could have left your car at my house, could have driven together. He said, no. You do what you have to do. I've come here to sort out my affairs. And he was the person who led his peers who worked in the Belfast and Mpumalanga area to be part of the large claim on asbestositis.
Oh.
See, my father, also from his family side and his peers, was a pioneer of sorts. But if I go back then so that I don't get embroiled in history, my maternal grandfather had a philosophy that he indoctrinated in his sons and in his grandsons. The Spedi version of Elias Bird is Mafadwa Khwale Kere Salosas. And his philosophy was the sun must not find you in bed. Okay. You must always rise before it pops up. Wow. And so we were all imbued with this sense of hard work is the best way of living.
Wow.
My father, on the other hand, used to say that grass must never grow on a man's hand, which means that you should not loiter, be lazy. You must, as it were, earn your keep through your hard work. Wow. Then if I go to the maternal side, my paternal grandmother made it her business. She was groomed from a generation where they felt the duty of a grandmother is to impart heritage to their offspring. So she made sure to fill the gaps where perhaps grandfather and father may have been too busy to do. So she made me recite our family totem.
Wow.
And said, you must know yourself that you carry the lion totem, Komatau. So you are a Moroka, which means people from the east. And so she made me appreciate the duty of being a bearer of the lion spirit in terms of the totem. So if you look at any place of significance, whether it's the Union Buildings, whether it's Trafalgar Square, whether it's Buckingham Palace, whether
Whether it's the crest for the Leading Self coaching, and or a lion.
A lion, statuette, standing guard.
Wow.
Because lions are protectors of the real. And therefore, in leadership, when you carry the lion spirit in terms of our heritage, is that you are there to be the guardian of other leaders. This later shaped my sense of definition of my life purpose. And it's for this reason that my personal website is lion3.
Yes.
.co.za.
Yes.
So later then in my professional journey, I then got to embrace and be exposed to all manner of definitions on leadership, from textbook definition, studying management and leadership, to being a practitioner. And in 1999, from the very many definitions that I've been part of, and the very many conversations I've been in on whether leaders are born or forged. The definition in 1999 by a gentleman called Joel Barker, he did a piece of work called Leadership. Okay. And in that work, he said, remember 1999, most people in this studio won't remember, but you and I will remember that in 1999, there was this scare called Y2K. So everybody was concerned when 2000 comes, is the world, are cars going to crash? Is the world going to come to standstill? Because apparently computers will not be able to count beyond 1999. So he was helping leaders prepare for that. And by that time, I was already practicing scenario thinking, scenario leadership, and strategic corporate strategy. And he says in that work, a leader is someone you choose to follow to a place that you wouldn't go by yourself. Okay. And the reason that is because the place where the leader must take people to is fraught with uncertainty and complexity. And so in this environment of high uncertainty, high complexity, we need leaders who help us figure out the path to where we should be going. And he then juxtaposes that to say the job of a leader, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a chair of a board, the job of a leader is to recognize and secure the future. So you almost have to, Moses-like, say, I've been to Canaan, now let me come and take you there. Or I've seen Canaan, and I see Canaan. Yeah. So you must, at any given time as a leader, constantly be figuring out the future. Yeah. Because he also says the future is the only place worth leading people to. Wow. So my journeys, my experiences and exposure in leadership have been anchored around that whenever you are entrusted with something to lead, whether when we met is to establish the organizational transformation unit of the Black Management Forum, or whether it's to become chair of Corporate X, first and foremost, you must ask yourself, what are the critical drivers that I need to be monitoring, to be tracking over the next 3 to 5 years relative to where I should be leading to? And then in your little black book or iPad or whatever, you then start ensuring that quarter to quarter you track those. Yeah. And every year you take stock. If in the times we're leading in, you mentioned political challenges. If in the times we're leading in, the critical issues seem to be related to ethics and corruption, they seem to be related to a global tariff war, they seem to be related to actual acts of war in certain regions of the globe, and trends in trade, trends in poverty. You have to have a sense of tracking, a dashboard of sorts. Yeah. Because those translate to risks that you face as a decision maker. The other part that I would say, and then perhaps I should pause and allow you for follow-up, is that we, as a leader, must always guard against being myopic.
Okay. And what do you mean by that?
So I see things happening in South Africa that we call state capture, and I become myopic and think it only happens in South Africa.
Okay. Wow.
In my mind, one of the errors in judgment from a leadership point of view that we made as general leadership in the country, we engaged with state capture as if it was a uniquely South African problem.
Okay.
And because of that, we failed to learn lessons, valuable lessons from elsewhere in the world. From where countries coexist of cartels, from experiences where cartels tell presidents what to do, but from sophisticated forms of state capture, like the oil oligarchs that told a president of a country to go and bomb another country looking for weapons of mass destruction. That didn't exist.
When there were none.
Yes. So the global phenomenon is kleptocracy. It sounds like a big word, but kleptocrats tend to fund political campaigns all over the world.
Yeah.
For the simple reason that when the incumbent assumes office, they will then be able to bend their ear. Okay. That is why today, if you look at the first term of the current US president and his current term, in his current term, he had 3 years to prepare.
Yeah.
After leaving the first term unceremoniously. And in the 3 years of preparation, it is very clear that he sat down a lot with the wealthiest people in the US. It is very clear that big tech had a big say in...
And a vested interest in using the presidency.
It is also very clear, if you listen to his mantra of drill, baby, drill, that the fossil fuel wealth sat with him on an anti-green economy basis. And all those gave very handsomely to his campaign. One of which in the big tech space, there's already been a fallout. But very clear, those are the people that he is answerable to.
Yeah. Is it
less so to the American people?
Are you then saying that leadership, in a sense, one, it's contextual? Okay, that there's a context through which leaders emerge. One, and that context plays an important role in terms of what that leader then becomes and where the leader is leading people to. And secondly, you when you were referencing your own history, your own past, your own shaping, that at times the family values play a very critical role in terms of shaping the person in terms of who they become, to a point where the external factors may be there, but the ingrained values sort of then sustain the person. So leaders don't just come from nowhere. Leaders are shaped by the society, the community, the family through which they come from.
Absolutely. I mean, leadership is a response. So that's the first thing. If, God forbid, while we're sitting here in the studio, something explodes, we're all going to panic. But someone with a sense of response, better response than all of us, is going to remain composed, is going to see through, so scan the environment, as we all say in corporates, and then say to us, no, stay calm. The exit point is that way. And we're going to follow that person. At that point in time, they become our leader. Now, leadership can evolve as a matter of response where a leader's groomed to become something. So if we look at the person of the President Thabo Mbeki, he would be an example of a leader that grew over time and was groomed for a certain purpose, while from a sense of internal locus of control, he had his own sense of life purpose that perhaps coalesced, happened to coincide with what he was being groomed to be. But the family in which he came from, as I say, we all get forged in the family as well, was a politically active, politically conscious family. And that also groomed him in a particular manner. If we look at perhaps President Nelson Mandela, he came from a certain traditional royal family. As a royalist, he was groomed to become somebody in a certain way as Holshasha. But again, a bit similar to my maternal grandfather, he chose a different path. In his case, he actually defied his father and said, no, I'm not going this way, I'm going that way. And again, that's a sense of innate sense of purpose, locus of control. As he was evolving from being a security guard in a mine to later becoming a lawyer, the circumstances in which he found himself, the then horrendous circumstances in the mines, sharpened him to choose a certain response relative to his sense of purpose. And he said, no, where I come from is in the royal house. We don't treat people like this in the community. Surely this is wrong. And then he saw that it's not just relative to him, it's actually affecting all persons of African descendants. And later he got to discover, even people called Coloureds and Indians are exposed to the same treatment. And then he got introduced to the African National Congress and so on. So we are born with certain leadership qualities. The application, the response,
it's more
in response to external stimuli.
I see.
In the environment you find yourself. I started to be a political activist at the age of 14 in high school. I went to an interesting school called S.J. van der Merwe Technical High School. My father who was an accountant, felt that he didn't want to see son sitting in an office like him. He should be fidgeting with gadgets and
more engineering type.
So ideally, I should have become an electric or electronic engineer because I did electronics in high school.
I see.
But we had teachers. Our biology teacher, woodwork teacher, came to school in a SADF uniform.
Okay.
And an R4, R1 drive in class.
Oh my. Yeah.
And sometimes insisted on teaching us biology in Afrikaans, and we would say no.
But then you'd look at the R1.
And you look at the R1 and say no, but we would say no. Our principal then, the first principal of the school, so we were the second cohort. So the school started with the first group in standard 6. As they went to standard 7, we came and became the first cohort to follow them. Mr. D.C. Benadi also came clearly from a militaristic background, but he was dressed like a civilian. In his office, he had salt water in a tube. You know, these science tubes used in the laboratory. So in a tube, and in there was cane sticks. So the cane was always flexible for whatever you came to the principal's office for. And so that began our journey of response. And as we then heard, at that time, there was no UDF yet. It was that moment of lull where the country was between black consciousness and others. So all we knew was to shout power. That's all. In 1982.
Yeah.
And Then a fellow student who came from Mamelodi said, no. Where I come from, there's something called COSAS.
Yeah, let's organize.
Let's organize around it. But remember, already around that time, there was talk of COSAS being banned. So then terms were played around and COSAS was reversed and pronounced SASCO. And we then became the first students in that district of Mogodumo to be organized around SASCO. And so a year later, when the UDF was formed, we then said,
morphed into that.
We are it.
Yeah.
Each one teach one.
Each one teach one.
Process.
The likes. And just on that point, so would you say then that leaders are also produced by the moment? So there's the urgency of the moment. So I mean, I look at someone like Biko, who also talking about a void, banning of political activity. A thinker emerges and says, this is where I think we should be going. I think of people in business as well, Bontate Mutsonyane, who emerged at a time when, there was a lull as well, but they said, okay, how do we infuse an entrepreneurial zeal into our and it doesn't mean that there were no organic entrepreneurs that were coming out of rural areas, out of townships. But I think Bodate Sam, the Gabi Mahovola of this world were emerging. Also, Lord Ndlovu were emerging around that time. Do you think that the moment also plays an important role in producing the kind of leaders that are needed for that time?
It's always the moment. As I say, it's a response. It is also back to being forged in the family. Another author in your new field of psychology called Kevin Lehman gave us a toolkit in a book called The Birth Order Book, The Reason You Are the Way You Are.
Wow.
So being forged in the family, those that are born as firstborns like me, you get a sense of duty early in life because firstly, it is instilled in you by your parents. Secondly, functionally, you end up being a deputy parent before you know it. Functionally, you end up being the one that must set a good example for those coming after you. So there are leaders who perhaps are formal like that. And then you get second-borns who, if you place them in a position of leadership, they are very supportive people. Even in Africa, most second-borns are called Bomutusi, Batusi, because the parents already craft your role.
Yeah.
That, you're there to support. That I was talking about President Dubek, he's an brothers Mweleti, so they must have thought he's going to be the advisor to the Boran.
And then also, I mean, you think about how many whispering he's had to do over the years to the big brother.
I don't know if they agreed on the whispering.
Exactly.
But second-borns generally, well, he's not necessarily a second-born, but second-borns are they're often supportive. And when they become leaders, they become nurturing, supportive leaders. Then you get middle children. And he says in his work that you find these middle children in the law fraternity. You find them in investment banking and often in banking generally, in trade. Because they grow up bargaining, negotiate between older and younger siblings. Sometimes they make good judges because they grow up being peacemakers. And so a leader like that will naturally navigate in that direction in terms of if we stick with the idea of a response. Then comes the last born.
Oh my.
The last born is a change agent. Becomes a change agent because when they were growing up, the parents were discipline fatigued. And therefore, they would take this glass and break it on the floor, and the parents, it's just a child. So and so, come and watch. They call the firstborn. Firstborn, come and watch. So the lastborn realize, I can break and get away with it.
Yeah.
So they learn to push boundaries. They become rebels. And so chances are, if you look at the cohort of 1940s between the untold embedders and so on, amongst them, you are most likely to find lastborns. Because they were rebelling against the older generation, saying, no, you're too slow with the struggle.
Yeah.
But equally, an only child, a person who grows up as an only child, may also be like that.
Okay.
Because they got treated like an adult too quickly. When you're an only child, sometimes parents forget to say, go and play with your toys. We're still talking. They talk about everything there in front of. So you end up having limited filters because you have not really known how to filter between children's stuff and adult
stuff. Wow. Very interesting.
That's how we also get forged in the family, because how we are raised determines the types of style of leaders. Will we become a change agent? Will we become the steady hand of a firstborn? Will we become a leader who's a brilliant deal maker that constantly negotiates?
Yeah.
So those things also. So even in politics, I haven't checked the birth order of Donald Trump, but he's very transactional, as if though he's a middle child. I'm yet to study his birth order. But if you look at the two Bush presidents, they were both older siblings, and they did as they were told. And in their style of presidents, you see it. If you look at Madiba, who gave us the heritage of being our founding president, he's a first older sibling. And he did all the responsible things. He shows all the responsible things for us.
Because there's so much that was expected of them. So they then lead that way.
They lead. So the value systems that guide them to choose is, in Madiba's case, the one of a formidable firstborn who must choose the right thing, must choose reconciliation for us rather than war, and so on and so on. Over and above his makeup, in terms of his personal values, but the forging was a forging of a firstborn leader.
You in your talks, you talk a great deal about leadership and vision, strategy. You said something very interesting, and I was listening to one of your talks where you spoke about building a common vision. But you approached it very interestingly. You said, you grew up in the north, you spoke Sepedi, you studied in KZN, and you became fluent in isiZulu. But then you find that South Africans really don't know each other's languages because they become intolerant when it comes to what were you saying there? But what were the lessons also that you were trying to point to? Because I think, when I was listening, I said, Mpho Makwana is literally talking here about how do we forge a common vision. And a common vision comes from common understanding each other. And it's actually about reaching out to each other as a people.
There are many variables to it. Firstly, there's the most common variable is diversity and inclusion. Leaders have to, because let's define diversity. Diversity simply says you fuse similarities and differences. So as a leader, you've got to know, just when we're talking about birth order, you've got to know the qualities of the different people that you lead, so that you're able to tap the most out of them from their strengths. But secondly, leadership, you mentioned earlier, is also contextual. So if I look at my maternal grandfather as an example, every 5 years or so they moved.
Okay.
Because in their language, you got a barup, a calling from one congregation. So Me and my family, they've lived in Rotanda, Heidelberg. They've lived in a natural thing you develop as a child of a preacher who moves from one congregation to another is you adapt. In the first 7 years of my existence, we were Methodists. And in Jane First Kukune, where we speak pure spit, our Methodist church reverend when I was 5 was Xhosa.
Okay.
Reverend Njunje. And so even the offering of sermons and
was
some in the mouths are in Xhosa anyway.
Yeah.
Jane First itself was a melting pot because it was a nursing college, it was a hospital. So we got students from all over the country. And my mother worked with them. So some would come home for coffee and you say, Dumelan Leka, and they say, Molweni, Sawona, I am Injan. And so you adapt as a host. This helps you later in life to become versatile. Our neighbors were also multi-tribe, multi-language. And so when you greet your neighbors, my first exposure to isiSwati was neighbors that came from Mpumalanga to stay there also because the mother worked in the hospital. And we used to laugh at how they speak until we adapted because the people tease Swatis, they say sometimes if you've heard Zulu,
Exactly.
and when Umswati speak, it's like a child lineage. So we used to tease them like that. But later when we played, shared toys, shared wired cars, we had to sit together and make a wired car and learn
the language. Exactly.
Now, when one went to Ongoye at the University of Zululand, it was still during the difficult times of apartheid and homelands. And I remember there was this notion that those of us who came from Interlands Far, we were referred to as Ilwan by traditional die-hard Zulu speakers. So among themselves, when they don't see you around, say, hey, Azumfred, le Ilwanyana zase Gauteng, zase Goli. So you would then see that, hey, if I don't adapt here, and it was dangerous then to be a politically activist person, as I happened to be, and then not know whether the next person standing next to you could be from another side of the political sphere that was very difficult. They carried a traditional gun called a kwash. And you could either suffer serious fatalities. So you had to know how to adapt and survive. But most importantly, just to blend in and feel at home. So you then end up, when I worked with Prof. Nkushu and other colleagues in what used to be called Mick Bank, our offices were literally behind this building here in the Craig Hall Office Park. Our first asset was the former Bank of Transkei.
Oh, wow.
So now how do you go to Umtata Transkei?
And not speak the language?
And be one of the founder directors responsible for people management. And not be able to converse. So I, on average, spent a fortnight in MTAT. And if you visit branches, whether it's Flagstaff or Etuja or wherever, you can't just get in there and say good morning. You must be able to greet and people open up to you.
You are big on systems theory. And my understanding and study of systems is that things are interrelated. You can't just approach or find a solution to a problem in isolation. You've got to contextualize it in terms of how it relates to other things within that. Explain to us, I mean, if you look at leadership development in South Africa and where we are today, how does systems approach deal with some of the challenges that we face?
systems thinking really says that, firstly, it borrows firstly from the iceberg theory. It borrows from the fact that most organizations are sunk like the Titanic sank because the people, the captain of the Titanic and his crew, they saw what was an iceberg ahead. They saw the tip of it. And they failed to recognize it could be bigger beneath the water. And they then navigated too close to the iceberg only to crash into it. And so in corporations, in organizations generally, not just corporations, when we solve problems, the tip of the iceberg is known as the events level. You shouldn't solve problems based on the events you see. So back to the example I gave earlier about state capture. We saw state capture, then we saw a certain family, a certain political family, and their close associates. But perhaps one of the things the state capture attempted to do, I'm not sure if it did it successfully, was to look beneath the iceberg. But now when you look beneath the iceberg, there are certain things you should look for to solve the problem holistically. You should look for patterns. Perhaps we found some elementary patterns in the commission, but you should also look at a critical thing called values. And sadly, the values were not dealt with. Okay. We've got a systemic values problem of corruption in the country. As much as we had a systemic values problem among Fortune 500 companies when cases like Enron and Parmalat showed up. That's what I'm saying. We made the mistake of treating this as a uniquely South African problem. Because the lessons from Parmalat and Enron and those corporate failures, Lehman Brothers, was that people as CEOs and leaders of those large corporations, the notion was people always felt if CEO Maqetuka is doing this, why can't I do it? Yeah. If I get caught, it's like, why are they picking on me? And so
it's an industry thing.
CEOs' mindset. CEOs then got carried away with what can I get away with without being caught? And so now in our civil service, in our political sphere, there is that syndrome. What can I do? How far can I push the envelope without getting caught? And what can I get away with? That's why most people who are capable will not provide services to state-owned and to state departments, because they don't want to be associated with an incident where you pitch for work, you have competitive pricing, but you're going to end up inflating your fees and your prices because someone that has to process your application or tender wants a cut. For you to be profitable, you must share, and therefore you end up inflating. And then it ends up being a norm to the values thing that, well, in this space and that space, for you to win work, you must play the game. Yeah. And so systems thinking says you've got to look at values that permeate if you are to change to shift the whole ecosystem. Beyond values, beyond the patterns, is then rules and regulations. A man known as Professor Ali Mazrui wrote a profound book in 1993 called Forces of World Politics, where he was looking at how global politics enshrines certain behaviors. There's a section, a chapter where he talks about the role of culture. He calls it the 7 functions of culture. And that's why in most corporations that are doing well, one of the things they're doing exceptionally well is investing in culture shaping. Yeah. Culture shaping says this is how things are done here. And equally, this is how things are not done here. And if you do things in terms of how we don't do them, you get chucked out.
Sure.
And so in the BMF, when we dealt with transformation, we used to say that there's nothing wrong with being black and female. And equally, there was nothing wrong with being white. What was wrong is the systems of reward and punishment, the carrots and stick, that determines what passes, what doesn't pass.
Yeah.
So if you look at the controversial issue, the contentious issue of merit, in an environment that rewards certain behaviors that associate merit with a certain skin texture and gender, if you're not male and white, you don't progress.
Yeah.
But if you endear yourself to those white males, perhaps you become a lurky, and perhaps you advance on the basis of being somewhat liked, which is never sustainable anyway. So you want to change the systems to be full, all-embracing to any human being, regardless of their abilities, disabilities, color, or creed. So systems thinking says change the whole.
Yeah.
But when you solve problems, solve the root causes.
Yeah. Don't just jump.
Don't solve the symptoms.
The event. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Lovely. I mean, you go into scenarios, because I think, when you diagnose a challenge, you also have to look at, okay, if I'm solutioning for this, what type of future am I envisioning? And you talk a lot about the in Zulamiti scenario planning. Tell us a little bit about that, and also, I know in Zulamiti they talk about the Guara, the different types of scenarios that we had, and maybe frame it in a way that also says this is the kind of scenario that if we sort of invest time in effort and resources, this is how we can come out better as a country.
I guess firstly, just in terms of scenarios, there's scenario planning and there's scenario thinking.
Okay.
And then there's a third, as if that was not simple enough, there's a third dimension of scenario-based strategy. If you look at the work of perhaps the renowned thought leader Clem Santa, as we approached the New South Africa, he gave us scenario forecasts. That scenario plan. That as a country, there was this high road, middle road, low road. But at its best, in the context of systems thinking, scenario-based strategy is a system that facilitates mutual learning. Because as leaders, we need to have a sense of shared, robust thinking around the problems that have to be solved. So South Africa went through a journey, a history of scenarios. As we became a democracy, the first scenarios we invested in as a country was the Montflier scenarios of 1992. Those scenarios gave us a 10-year horizon as to what needed to happen in the new South Africa. And people like Trevor Manuel, he was young then, speak of us moving from a vicious cycle to a beneficial economic cycle. And in there were choices about, for instance, the ostrich scenario, where people would, as leaders, bury their heads in the sand and not respond.
And hope that things will resolve themselves.
Yes, and then there was the flamingo scenario, which was about flight of the flamingo flying together to greater heights as a nation, which was the post. But that tool set of scenario thinking based on systems thinking borrows from Shell. Royal Dutch Shell is the home of this type of thinking. you firstly identify a key set of strategic drivers to what I said earlier about scaling, reading the environment. And you identify those set of strategic drivers coming from the macroeconomic environment, political, economic, social, technological, and you say these are the top 10, top 20 strategic drivers to watch. You then cluster them on a quadrant of which ones have a relative high uncertainty, which ones have a relatively high impact. And out of those, you go and write stories about them against a future timeline. We believe that in 10 years' time, 5 years' time, now with the rapid change, you can't even think 10 years ahead, probably 3-5 years ahead. And you say, we think 10 years will look like this, but in the immediate long term, 3 to 5 years, this is more or less the key drivers. This is more or less how we think AI is going to shape how we govern.
Because that's another big one.
This is more or less what we think keeps the youth awake at night. In terms of wellness, this more or less, for many years, every strategy had a worry about quality of talent versus HIV/AIDS. So whatever the health and wellness issues are, right now we're dealing with symptoms of long COVID, and it requires a certain different approach to talent and health and wellness. This is how we think the economy is going to pan out. This is how we think technology is going to unfold. This is how we think the economy is going to unfold, and so forth. Global trade, and so on. And then you plot them.
Yeah.
Then you're going to follow the next step where you need to write plausible stories, not pipe dreams, plausible stories about the future using those drivers. Secondly, they must be novel. In other words, they must stimulate, they must challenge the thinking. And then thirdly, they must stretch the thinking.
Okay.
Once you do those things, then you emerge with probably 3 or 4 top stories that are written around the myriad of those drivers. And the key thing back to the iceberg is to say, what do we need to constantly know about?
Yeah.
So you're going to end up with a list of say, this is what we know, this is what we need to know, and this is what we need to track in terms of, and this is what we don't know. So what we know, we don't know, what we know, and so on. And then you start saying what we don't know that we don't know, or what we know that we don't know. Let's get people to go out and research and go dig deeper, because that's where our biggest pitfalls are going to come from. What we have relative knowledge over, we just need to track, but they're not likely to have a high impact, because if we know enough, we can solve the uncertainty and make them relatively certain.
And I suppose the ultimate goal is to find not solutions, but to create a platform where we can build and thrive, as a nation. And
well, firstly, the ultimate goal is to open blind spots.
Okay.
At some point, I was a partner in a firm, a global strategy firm called Monitor Group. Today it's Deloitte Bonneton. They used to have Kodak, the much spoken about Kodak. That was their client. They went to Kodak and said, we're back to observing trends. We've been observing technology trends relative to your strategy as your strategy advisors. We want to alert you. And this was the first time when that mid-sized Nokia came with a button in the middle and you take snaps of it. And they said, you see, this thing takes snaps. It is threatening your instant photography. When we grew up, we called it center. It was the quickest way to make pocket money at high school and varsity, walking around with an instant camera, take a shot.
And then comes out.
Polaroid comes out, and then you get paid your 10 rands.
Yeah.
And so the CEO then thought, these guys have run out of fees. They've come to scout for additional fees and chucked them out of his office in Boston. And therefore, today Kodak is more in the X-ray business than where it used to be traditional. I mean, when you and I first met at BMF, I did my presentations using 3M slides,
yeah,
on a projector.
yeah,
Again, those projectors are gone.
yeah.
In terms of 3M's business. 3M then participated in a study called Built to Last. And the authors of Built to Last, who were also strategists, helped them to figure out that you've got to kill, they said you've got to eat your strategy for lunch, deliberately cannibalize products so that you can invent new things. So they then got to invent the data project and others, but others sadly didn't get to do that. And so scenario thinking for government has to also tie in with the notion of the competitive advantage of nations, which is largely in the macroeconomic sphere. But there's a gentleman who's not a macroeconomist who did something called the Good Country Index. Yeah. He was a political economist who advised lots of prime ministers and started out by designing what you called the Good Country Index. And latest work is what he defines as the Good Country Equation. So if we go back to where we started earlier about kleptocracy and state capture, if, for instance, we had said, let's have the locals under commission, but equally, let's have equivalent to what the President Ramaphosa called economic envoys. Imabugu should have looked for envoys that go to study countries that used to be trapped in corruption that have come out.
Okay.
For instance, Chile is such a country. It was written off in terms of being neighbors with the likes of Colombia and so on, who then had to figure out that if we are to grow, if we are to create value, we have to do something about our cartels.
Yeah. These are the actions.
And therefore, this is how you rebuild reputation. Yeah. So the Good Country Equation says, here's a set of drivers that if you stay on top of, you can then define who has to deliver what their fair share is between government, business, labor, civil society in delivering a good country equation. So you can still do the scenarios. The scenario, the Limit now got a new edition in the Limit 2035, SA 2035. So they've moved from Gwara to birds now.
Oh, wow.
They have got the Hadidas in Aya and Aya birds that they have in there. And the worst scenario is the vulture scenario.
Hey, where we eat each other.
Where we eat each other, or vultures devour the state.
Devour the state and finish it. I mean, just on that point, you are a former chairman of Eskom. And I mean, I think our state-owned, or the state of affairs in our state-owned institutions generally, I think leave much to be desired. Do you think, because I'm thinking that in most countries, if you look at China and some of those countries, state-owned institutions were the catalyst towards economic growth. State-owned institutions led to entrepreneurial ventures that stimulated entrepreneurial ventures. Where are we with some of our state institutions? I mean, I think it's become a normal topic of people saying without power, we can't even have data centers in the country to begin to compete from an AI perspective. Are these the conversations that are held? And I'm not saying reveal some of your own conversations that you've had as a board but is that not a threat to our country's future, the state where Eskom is now?
Well, firstly, I've been enjoying my peace and quiet below radar. But I think that if I can speak purely now from observation outside in, my biggest lesson, I would say, from my second tenure, because this was my second tenure as chair of Eskom, And I've always had the advantage of having institutional memory of what a good Eskom used to look like. And the constraint, I see it more as an Eskom that was constrained than a bad Eskom. The constrained Eskom that I, second time around, was privileged to lead as chair, we were fortunate to constantly have leaders, especially in the generations division, who recalled what a good Eskom used to look like. I'm not at all saying it's all rosy and flowery. There are some huge challenges. Not just in Eskom, across the various state-owned entities, in terms of the systemic issues we spoke about earlier of embedded corruption. But what I found we could work with as a collective of leaders on the board was men and women who took their identity. Eskom employees call themselves guardians of the economy. And they took that seriously. Largely, again, to the point of leaders and response. They lived in the same communities that suffered load shed. Their children were bullied at schools. Their families could no longer enjoy going to dinner parties and so on because their partners worked for this entity. And so a lot of them said, no, we have within our control to fix this place. There were skeptics. I remember the many occasions where I had to participate as practice alongside executive management to brief the country on the state of the grid and so on. When we told people load shedding will be solved, people thought I was just reading a political script. But it was informed by, firstly, we took a conscious decision. When I accepted my duties, one of the things I had to do was sit with my political principal then, Minister Gordon, to say, how do we structure the board for effectiveness? And upon reflection, I then proposed to him that I'm of the view that we should have a technical committee of the board, because I saw the problems to be largely technical. And so we had the benefit of that Mthetho Nyati, an engineer himself, and a few other engineers, including one of the engineers that he's got this dying passion about data analytics. And he had all sorts of graphs and charts on what was going wrong day to day with energy availability. So all those people formed part of the board technical committee. They were not 100% all engineers. Majority were technical people, but we also, again, systems thinking, we had non-engineers there as well to also see the blind spots from a different perspective. Out of that process, when they had their initial workshop with the different power stations, we were able to quickly isolate which power stations, in spite of that difficult dark time of load shedding, there were power stations that maintained healthy energy availability factor. And we could then see that actually there were pockets of excellence that could be transferred to other spheres. But we could also see the dark side of the difficulties. A man that had been isolated by his bosses then, he was relegated to, it's like being sent to exile to a division in Germiston away from Megawatt, kept on surfacing on our area in terms of the quality of inputs, quality of contributions. And one of the inputs that he used to give was, imagine it's like if you and I, from our generation, remember old cars. And I'll stick to the analogy I used to use in the public briefings. So if, for instance, we were brothers and our father drove a 1980 Ford Granada when we grew up, chances are, if you remember those cars like Scope and Cherry and so on, our parents couldn't afford new cars. So when you bought a car, firstly, you bought a car that you believed was built to last. And because it's mechanical, you would also know that every 10, 15 years you'd have to do something to it. And the generation of fathers then had the thing they did called an engine overhaul.
Yeah.
Once in a while, they go buy a new engine, take the old one out. So power stations generally can be like that. If you fix the core, and by the way, it used to be told by some of their bosses that, no, we need to go to Germany and Japan and I don't know where else to get parts.
Yeah.
But it turns out right here in Germiston, we had the solution. But the person sitting with the solution was isolated and not listened to.
And I wonder why.
Some of us went there for a walkabout and saw that actually, so there's something that's probably 3 times the size of this, a router of the system of a power station's boiler system. If you replace that power station is as good as new for 20 years. Yes, we would still have a problem of fossil fuel and carbon emissions, but the engine room would be fixed.
Yeah.
And therefore, if we had proper plans and proper leadership, that was part of the problem solved. The second part of the problem solved was that you needed power station managers to be power station managers, and that they should be empowered to make the call on where to fix what at what point to keep the machines going. And then thirdly, you just needed to have capable leaders.
Yeah.
Not necessarily leaders who were there because, to my analogy earlier about being endeared to a certain leadership code, but people who were there who knew how to just do what is right, is mechanically or engineering.
Yeah.
So Mr. Nxumalo has proven to the country, to the naysayers, that firstly, black leaders are capable.
Yeah.
For me, that is the most fulfilling in all this. We did not get a Tom Smith from the UK or a Jürgen what from Germany to come and help us fix our problems.
We had local solutions, local people.
Local capability that gave us local solutions.
Wow.
And that's the first order of business for me in fixing the rest of the associates. There's someone who's been in the system for 25 years, for 30 years.
And who knows where the broken
places are, who believes in excellence, but most importantly, who feels the pinch the same way that the community affected feels the pinch.
There's been talk of sabotage as a bit because, the whole narrative around, and I'm going to be provocative, sorry, but the whole narrative around black excellence is a threat to certain quarters that you've got to always push the narrative that black people break things, they never build anything. Do you think that the sabotage analogy is a reality? And I'm not talking about only Eskom, I'm talking about SOEs in general. I mean, you've seen rail tracks being moved. Now coal cannot be railed from Mpumalanga to Richards Bay because the rail infrastructure has been sabotaged, and those things. How do have we planned for it? Are we planning for it and are we solving for it? Yeah.
So there is sabotage without a doubt. It is not technical sabotage. It is feeding scheme kleptocracy sabotage. In my view, there are people who have made it their business to fidget with machines, fidget with things, so that they continue to feed. So that you have recurring tenders
that are coming
to solve that. I don't want to violate confidentiality because there are some complications, but for instance, one of the last discoveries before I stepped down was we found that AI goes a long way and could go a long way to unearthing what was hidden to the view, to the general view of management. And so I think technology will go a long way to unearthing and letting things that are hidden to bubble in the events space, firstly. Secondly, leadership and simplicity is also key. If we look at Tutuka, for instance, the Standerton adjacent power station, that's where we used to hear a lot about a power station manager going to work with a bulletproof vest. The units there, only one out of the 3 or 4 units used to run. And then when Mr. Mumadu came, as I said earlier, because he knew, again, who to call upon, he called somebody who also had been isolated, who comes from Standerton, to go and run that as power station manager. It so happens that you grew up there. His father was an employee in the power station. So we went there with the portfolio committee after he assumed office, a month or so. The second unit was geared for coming on stream, and he was showing us plans on how other units would come on stream later. And so the output of electricity was increasing from that power station. Further, one of the provocative members of the portfolio committee says, "But why are you not wearing a bulletproof vest? We were told,
dangerous here.
Around this power station, you need a bulletproof vest." He says, "No, I'm a child of this community. I went to the community before I assumed office and told them I'm back home, and said to them, I know that when this power station runs, their livelihoods are okay. And I asked them for advice." And he says the community said to him, "We know these cartel people, who deal with them on your behalf, not street committees and things." So there, for instance, it turns out, and as I said, I don't want to compromise.
Yeah.
It turns out it could be that the person who was wearing a bulletproof vest was wearing it for different reasons other than being threatened. So again, ethics come to play here. Don't play games outside of your line of duty.
Indeed.
That's how best I can say.
Wow. I mean, and that's potentially an example of systems thinking, because he said, okay, I'm going to use the fact that I was born here to have conversations with the people, and people's participation influence how I lead at the power station, which was...
because the employees that work there come from the same community. You know, in the olden days, you solve problems in the shop floor.
Yeah.
And people in the shop floor says, if only this management could listen to us, because we know where the problems are.
Yeah.
So there are instances like the Tutuka power station where the workers and the community know the issues. I bet if you went to any community, whether it's at Middle B, whether it's wherever, and you said, tell us who these people are that are entrepreneurs that are hamstringing procurement. They know them.
Yeah. No, 100%.
And so as managers, if you work together, we solved this country at our best when we solved country problems. We solved them because each contributed their fair share in terms of community involvement, in terms of labor involvement, management, private sector. I mean, the private sector players that want to play clean, they know who their competitors are that are not clean. So if we could just dust off some of those best practices, I mean, that's how the best run Eskom used to be.
Yeah.
There was high sense of systems thinking. There was a high sense of organizational lineage. By the way, the book Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge, one of the foremost thought leaders in systems thinking. There's a chapter in Fifth Discipline about Eskom as a top-notch systems thinking organization. Wow. The person I learned scenario thinking from was a protege, I could say, of Peter Senge. Peter Senge came to South Africa in 1996 and wrote that chapter.
Wow.
On an Eskom case study.
Okay.
There's 2 Harvard business case studies on Eskom that we participated in the previous term, pre-FIFA World Cup term, where it's there written around how Eskom went about to become the 10th largest utility, the 10th utility in the world by generation capacity.
Wow. So there is a different alternative story around Eskom in terms of how efficient and how successful it's been. Yeah.
Of course, the context has changed now. We're separating the generation, transmission, and distribution. But there are people who are still alive, who are not senile, who still remember what a well-run Eskom used to look like.
Yeah. And we hope that
my appeal is that my former colleagues that are there must not be shy.
Yeah.
Some of the best organizations in the world have got alumni clubs of former employees, because these are pensioners of Eskom anyway.
Yeah.
So it is in their interest that their pension is secure.
Yeah, that they come up.
Bring them half a year into an alumni forum of sorts. Let them occasionally give input into how they used to do things.
And I suppose we may also give credit to the current guys, because I think that they have kept the lights on and they've done amazing work, and the current chairman as well, and CEO.
No, I'm confident that we will see ongoing improvement based on the current leadership. I've worked with most of them in the tenure we had as the first board of Eskom, because remember, before 2002, Eskom was a council.
Okay.
And from 2002 to 2011, some of us spent 9 years in the first commercial board of Eskom. And in those 9 years, people like Mpho Makwana surfaced, and many others that he's bringing back into the organization. The likes of Mr. Numalo also one met in that tenure. So there are people who are there. Some are still young. Some are disillusioned. There are some that I speak to from time to time. They are outside the system. Whenever you speak to them, you can see them turning teary. They may be in the banks. They may be wherever, but they love Eskom. And I'm certain that if you went into alumni of Transnet, whether you speak to the Mpho Makwana, the Desibia, and many others, I always notice that generation also still have fond passion and memories of the Transnet they used to work for.
As we conclude our conversation, one of the things that for me sort of and I suppose it's part of also scenario planning and systems thinking is around new young graduates who are coming into. It seems to me that it's almost embarrassing to see graduates holding boards in street corners saying I can't get employment. And I often ask myself, is it because industry and academia don't talk to each other to then find, the right skills for the right jobs? What's your take on building the next cohort of engineers, accountants, etc. for the economy?
I think there's a huge topic. I think there's very different mechanisms. But in short, there's a need to decode information.
Okay.
There is so much information about where you can get internships that perhaps those people don't get to access. There is so much happening in academia. As we speak now, in my role as adjunct professor at UNISA, the College for Economic Management Sciences, I'll be speaking in a webinar in mid-August on something called micro credential. It's what we used to call Ambachtsspoor programs. So short courses that you're able to do that gear you for certain things in the economy. If you look at countries like the Scandinavian countries, they thrive on this. Okay. Back to the BMF days, we once did a country visit to Sweden in 93, hosted by Ericsson. At the time, the cell phones were about to be introduced in South Africa. It was 94, sorry. And they took us to a village in Sweden called Kostepan. And there we were exposed to what is called a Volksschule, Ambach school, people's school, Volksschule. And in that village was renowned for producing book binders. So these hardcovers that books up, they make that the covers called book binding. You can even take your old book to be refurbished. And then they're also renowned for some of the traditional Swedish memorabilia that are made of wood. And there's a lot of other effects. It is said that some of the artisans of IKEA initially came from there. Okay. Now, what they do is they have a factory in a village that creates technical jobs. But behind the factory is an Ambach school.
That prepares.
Is it?
Okay, that prepares.
That certifies and prepares. So some may be absorbed by the factory, but others get absorbed elsewhere. Yeah. Then the front end is a store, a whole mall, like you'd see in Hartebeers or here in the break thing next to the prison. So the front end is retail. The middle end is manufacturing, and the rear end is academic development or training and development.
Wow. Imagine if we now to adopt that system.
Go back to the homelands. Babele in Hammanskraal, that was the model.
Yeah.
Eka Industria in Ekwandebele, that was the model. But we came in as Democrats in the New South Africa and kicked all those things away without looking at their value per se.
I see.
And if we just go back and dust off some of those things, we could just find that there's solutions for the challenges we face.
Mpho Makwana, thank you so much for joining us on the Leadingself podcast. I think it had been an enriching conversation, and I hope you guys out there listening, watching, you will be able to take some of these insights and see how we can sort of use them in our own spheres to make a difference and make this country, take it to where it belongs. Thank you for joining us. As we say, like, share, subscribe. Salute.